Hey, it's Komax and I'm here with What If Deku Had DNA Manipulation Part 2. If you enjoy this video, be sure to like, subscribe and share the video. Alright, let's jump in. Chapter 6. Izuku heard a knock on his door which immediately grabbed his attention before the door opened and the giant hero entered his new room. All Might stopped for a moment to take in his surroundings. From every side there have been smaller versions of himself staring at him, which was more than unnerving. "Hello there, young man. How did the hospital treat you?" he asked, ignoring the rest of the room and concentrating on its sole occupant. "The doctor was very nice, he even gave me a lollipop," Izuku said happily, and a wide smile appeared on his face. All Might's smile, however, wavered as he sat down on the ground to better face the boy, and the green-haired child noticed this immediately. "Are you mad that I broke your bag?" Izuku asked and lowered his head, which caught Toshinori completely by surprise, and he quickly patted the boy's head reassuringly. "No, it's okay, it was easy to put it back," he answered honestly, which calmed the boy a lot. "But we need to talk about your quirk, young Midoriya." "My quirk?" "Yes, young man, it seems that you now have the same power as me cursing through you," All Might said as he gently poked Izuku's tiny chest with his index finger before his face turned very serious in a second. "Listen, Izuku, I need you to promise me something." "Promise?" to All Might. "I need you to promise me that you will never abuse this power to harm others. That you will only use it to help and save those smaller and weaker. Can you do that for me?" All Might said before offering his hand to the boy. At that moment the young boy's mind went into overdrive. Even at 4 years of age he already knew that this was the moment that would determine the rest of his life. Tiny tears appeared in his eyes as he stood up and gave few of Toshinori's fingers a firm squeeze in affirmation. "Yes. I will be a hero just like you and I will save everyone. I promise." But that All Might's expression softened and a mischievous smile returned to his face as he quickly moved his hand into Izuku's armpit and started tickling him furiously. "I wish you the best of luck, young Midoriya." -5 p.m. at the meeting of Hero Public Safety Commission members. And that concludes this month's financial report. Finished the always extremely tired beige-haired Yakumiru and everyone else in the conference room sighed in relief, and about half of the even started to rise from their seats, only to be abruptly stopped by the president. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know that every one of you can't wait to get back home, but before we all go to our families, there is still one thing we need to discuss," she said calmly and nodded to someone behind her, and the projector was turned back on, showing a picture of a green-haired boy. This is Izuku Midoriya, a 4-year-old boy who was recently rescued by the #1 hero All Might. There was some murmuring among the other members which immediately stopped when the president gave them an irritated look. Since the child's name and photo was leaked into the press, the boy and his mother were placed under protection, but today All Might, with whom the family is currently staying, notified the commission about a small incident which took place during early morning hours of today. The child was apparently able to muster enough power to rival even some of the hero's strongest attacks. A 4-year-old as strong as All Might. This can't be real. To say that everyone in the room was shocked would be an understatement. They kept frantically looking at people sitting next to them. But if anything was clearly evident on them, it was fear. Most of the accidents involving quirks didn't involve professional heroes or villains. Both groups were almost always trying to end every conflict as quickly and cleanly as possible. Instead, these accidents were mostly caused by young children who had just discovered their quirks. These cases ranged from things not too serious like shoplifting and minor property damage to deadly like blackouts, arson and sometimes even deaths. Workers of this commission were no strangers to this, yet they couldn't even imagine the complete chaos and destruction that could ensue from a child with the power to demolish an entire city block with a single movement of his hand. He was taken earlier today to get his quirk analyzed, and Dr. Fujiwara is here to share the results. An elderly man with square gray haircut and deep wrinkles took the stage with a piece of paper. What came next was a 10-minute lecture of how exactly Izuku's quirk functions, which only made the entire room more nervous. When the elderly scientist stopped talking, there was once again energetic murmuring between the members. "Everyone please calm down. This situation will be handled accordingly, but for the time being all we can do is to observe." "Observe?" "Have you gone mad?" yelled a bearded man from the back of the room. "What if the boy absorbs more dangerous quirks? There is no way a child could ever be trusted with that power," shouted another one of the listeners as she jumped from her seat. Those angry and panic-filled voices were immediately stopped when the president slapped her hand on her desk, which once again got the attention of everyone. "We have already took some safety precautions, but the boy will be constantly observed either by our agents or by the number one hero, which should minimize the possibility of any dangerous situation." -7 hours later at the penthouse balcony. Izuku put down the phone he borrowed from his mother's handbag against the windowsill and pointed the camera at himself. The jumpsuit, which he was wearing right now, was weird. It was hand-delivered earlier just a few hours ago to his new home, along with a pair of gloves by two men who both looked like secret agents, but both his mother and Toshinori implored him to wear this new suit whenever he went outside under his normal clothes. Even though it was skin-tight, it didn't feel at all uncomfortable. It had been made from a very comfortable and thin green material, and it soon felt like a second skin to young Izuku, but more importantly for him, it looked like a real hero costume. He checked his appearance before pulling up a sign made of cardboard. He tore from one of the boxes containing All Might's merchandise and painted a large blue and yellow one over with his crayons. "This is a quirk test number 1. He whispered excitedly and then put the sign down. Luckily for him, All Might left just 2 hours ago and his mother was fast asleep in her room. He would have asked for permission to practice using his quirk, but after what happened earlier today, he wasn't sure if it was safe for his mother. Earlier that day. "Hey mom, look what I can do," Izuku said as many bones suddenly burst out of the skin on his arm, creating an ominous jagged spear, and then reverted back to normal. "Ta-da!" he exclaimed happily. "That's very nice, Izuku," she said slowly with wide eyes before promptly fainting. "Mom, no." Izuku yelled in horror while jumping towards her and bracing her before she could hit the floor. Her weight was too much for the boy though, and so they both crashed down with her son pinned under her belly. When All Might saw this, he quickly hurried over and picked up Inko, which allowed the boy to crawl away. "What happened, are you okay?" asked All Might with worry in his voice while carefully putting down the mother on a nearby sofa. "I don't know, I just showed her my quirk," Izuku responded unsurely. He outstretched his arm and gave the number one hero the same demonstration. "So disturbing. Back in present. Okay, so first up, sharp boner," he said as his arm transformed into a bone blade. Izuku let out a happy giggle as the sharp bone made the tiniest reflection of moonlight. "Wow, it's so cool." He silently gushed over it with little sparks in his eyes while gently and slowly waving it through the air and adding whoosh sounds with his mouth. After a while he walked away from the camera's watchful eye and came back a moment later with a plain piece of paper and attempted to perform the sharpness test he once saw in a TV commercial, but before he could, the paper was taken from him by a random gust of wind and drifted down to the streets below. Similar mostly unsuccessful tests continued for a while until he got tired and returned his arm back to its normal form. He began to sneak his way back to bed when he thought about what All Might was doing right now with envy. Probably catching criminals, saving civilians, or maybe just flying. Then a sudden realization struck him. Does it mean that I can fly now too? He ditched his bedtime for a while and turned the camera back on. He always does this weird squat thingy whenever in the air. The young boy tried to copy the hero squat as he coined it, but quickly lost his balance and fell on his back. Maybe he does it when he's already flying. He got back on his feet and tried to copy an old flying pose he saw some weird cleft-chinned American hero do a while back, but nothing happened. "Oh, I know, I must already be in air." And with this idea, Izuku started jumping around like a broken mechanical frog, but still ended without results. Yet his determination wouldn't let the boy just fail, so he took a running start, flexed every muscle in his tiny body, and the next thing he felt was intense wind pressure ruffling his face. At the Todoroki abode. Shoto Todoroki was sitting in the garden alone looking at the fish in the koi pond, slowly swimming in circles. Ever since he had his bandages removed, the boy with heterochromia had trouble falling asleep. The nightmares which came after the whole kettle incident never really stopped. He could still see his mother with a scary look in her eyes, only to be blinded by indescribable pain. He slowly and carefully brought his right hand to his new scar and let his quirk slowly cool his mostly healed but still sensitive wound. Right now, he had no one to talk to, his mom was probably the only pillar of support he ever had, even though he liked his siblings very much his father never let him get very close to them or even play with them. Then there was the man himself and he would have a better chance if he tried talking to a rock. Shoto cautiously waved his hand through the air creating small soft snowflakes and watched them drift in the wind. "Mom, I hope that whenever you are okay." This moment of peace was however immediately interrupted by a shower of sand when something, which could only be described as green thunder, landed in the sandpit. The boy immediately jumped from the bench he was sitting on and dove for cover. What is this? A villain attack. His panicked thoughts were broken up when a voice came from the sandpit. I'm alive. I am alive," Izuku said with relief while stepping out of the sand. Todoroki peeked from behind the bench he hid behind only to see a smaller boy in a green jumpsuit dusting himself off. "Wow, this suit is really something, it doesn't have a scratch on it." Are you okay?" asked shyly Todoroki as approached the younger boy. The green-haired boy looked at the unknown person and immediately tears rushed into his eyes. "I'm sorry about your Vesabramsi will fix it as did a hold of me quick didn't mean to hurt you it was an accident." Izuku quickly mumbled an apology which caught the other boy completely off guard. "It's fine, it's not your fault. But your hair's full of blood." "That's my normal hair color." Todoroki deadpanned while pointing at his hair and watched as the face of sadness quickly transformed into one of excitement. "Wait, you have two colors? That's so awesome." "It is? Yeah. Are other parts of you also two-colored, like your teeth or your toenails?" "No, just my hair and my eyes." "Your eyes, oh wait, you are right. How did I not notice that? That's so cool." Even though Shoto was feeling sad, angry and cluelessly lost just a moment ago, Izuku's enthusiasm and positivity were so incredibly potent and infectious, it brought a small smile back on the scarred boy's face. And so the two boys talked about anything that came to mind, and Izuku's interest only skyrocketed when Shoto agreed to show him his own quirk by creating two ice popsicles from twigs lying on the ground around the nearby tree, which were quickly abandoned due to their horrid taste. "How did you end up in here anyway?" asked Todoroki suddenly, which quickly flipped the boy's smile upside down. "Oh no, I have to get back home quickly before he returns." He couldn't even imagine the chaos that would follow if All Might came back home and didn't find him there. He took a quick look and found a few skyscrapers in the distance. "I am so sorry, but I have to go. Let's talk later," said Izuku and quickly bowed in apology before he prepared for jumping again. "Wait. What's your name?" Todoroki asked abruptly, scared of losing a new friend. "It's Izuku," he said quickly and jumped with all his strength into the night sky. The wind whipped his entire body as he flew towards the large building, and very soon he realized the fact that he completely overshot his target. He wanted to scream, but it was nearly impossible to even breath, and so he was reduced to watch in terror as the ground got slowly closer. Then a massive object collided with him, snatching him from air before they both landed on a roof of a supermarket. "You are under arrest for resisting arrest and other charges," exclaimed Toshinori sternly before taking another leap towards the skyscraper with Izuku safe in his arms. Later in the living room. "So, what exactly were you thinking, young man?" All Might asked seriously. Right after they returned, All Might sat the boy down on an armchair and began questioning him. Luckily the green-haired boy was uninjured and Inko was still asleep when they returned. He couldn't even imagine how the mother would react if she learned about what happened. "I am sorry, I just wanted to be like you. If I want to become a hero like you I have to train super hard, right? And so I thought I would start early," was all he managed to say before sobbing and heavy tears overtook him, and honestly, Toshinori didn't know how to react. 6 months. He said suddenly, and Izuku turned his red and swollen eyes towards him. "It took me 6 months to master that jump. During that time I have hardly slept and felt as if anything I did wasn't enough. Look, you don't need to rush anything, just keep your target in your sight and I am sure you will reach it." All Might took a knee in front of the little boy as he finished and then pulled out a handkerchief and smothered the boy's face with it, wiping away all of his tears. You don't need to copy me, just be who you want to be, and I promise that I will help you. The big man said and smiled at the young boy, who just stared at him in awe. I will try to, All Might. I was worried, but now I see that I couldn't ask for a better person to inherit this power. Now go back to bed, you have kindergarten tomorrow, right? And soon the boy slept soundly with a small smile of relief back on his face. Chapter 7. Izuku's shyness was pushed into an overdrive after he discovered that the kindergarten he would be brought to was not the one he usually visited, but an entirely new one. It calmed a bit him when his mother told him that this was only a temporary change until things got back to normal, but it was still hard for him to imagine that he wouldn't see his friends, but instead some new people he has never seen before. Izuku's mother wasn't very pleased about the fact either, but after a talk with All Might and a short phone call with a friendly detective she understood that it was just a temporary safety measure both for her son and for the other children. He would be moved into the daycare service established by the Safety Commission for young children or other relatives of well-known heroes to ensure their well-being and protection. It was much larger than the green-haired boy expected, and there weren't just toys and jumping ropes like in the old one, here they had a trampoline, 2 ball pits and even a small slide. "Oh, you must be the new resident of ours," said a young lady as she walked towards Izuku and gave him a pat on the head. "I am Michiko, and what do I call you?" she asked enthusiastically and looked at the boy with a soft smile. "Izuku, ma'am." "Oh, what a fine young gentleman. Well Izuku, if you need anything just come and ask Naoko, stop that right now," she exclaimed suddenly and ran off to 2 boys wrestling on the carpet nearby to break up the fight. He felt like a celebrity since he and his mom had been escorted there in a police car, but things soon turned sour when he noticed that all the kids were already in groups playing wide variety of games, and the shy little green-haired boy didn't have an idea how he should approach them and ask if he could join them. Tag players just rushed past him before he even managed to get a word out. Children in ball pits simply dug themselves deeper as soon as he approached them like earthworms, and the kids playing with blocks have built a huge tower with their quirks and didn't even notice him. "Come on Tenya, don't you want to go play with others?" he heard nearby and turned his attention towards another caretaker currently reasoning with a slightly taller boy with glasses. "I am doing research, I can't right now, Miss Takara," he exclaimed and wildly gestured with his hands towards the pile of papers on the table before him. It was as if a tiny robot went rogue and then caught an error in processing, which prompted Izuku to take a closer look. Just as he came near the taller boy, young Tenya suddenly jumped from his seat and thrust his arm, nearly hitting the green-haired child in the process. "Oh, you must be new here, I am Tenya Ida," said the spectacled kid energetically without changing his serious expression even a little. Izuku slowly accepted the hand and gently shook it and introduced himself again. After the quick social interaction, the boy immediately turned around, grabbed a small light blue scope with stars and planets painted on it, and looked through a window behind himself. Izuku took a step forward and looked through the window himself, but didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. There was just a small park outside and a few dark clouds outside, but the taller boy seemed completely focused on what was happening outside. "Wow, what are you watching, Tenya?" But the green-haired boy didn't get an answer. Iida just turned back around, started and quickly drawing a tree with something small and roundish hanging of it on a piece of paper before putting it neatly on an organized stack of papers, all displaying the similar picture. He made sure the papers didn't stick out at all before turning his attention back on the green-haired kid. "Can you keep a secret?" he asked with an incredibly serious expression after he took a quick look around the room to make sure no one was listening. Izuku hesitated for a few seconds before nodding repeatedly. "I am trying to uncover the most important secret in the world," Iida said excitedly with an incredibly serious face and his arms gesticulating furiously. "What is the secret?" Izuku asked after holding his breath for a few moments without even realizing it. "That secret is, where do babies come from?" "What do you mean?" Izuku asked, confused. This idea didn't ever even cross his mind. "Think about it. My mom always tells me and my brother that we were cute babies. I can't even remember being a baby, let alone anything before that, can you?" the blue-haired boy asked, and the shorter boy couldn't help but agree. There was no way anyone could ever hope to remember something like that. But what are you looking at? The taller boy quickly handed him the small toy scope and pointed at one of the large trees outside. Izuku tried to observe the tree, but it was just a regular plant. I don't get it. No, not the tree, the beehive on the tree. Izuku looked again and this time he saw it. There was a little natural apiary hanging from one of the branches. Oh yeah, you are right, that's so cool. But what does it have to do with babies? Smolita readjusted his glasses before looking at the shorter child with determination of a seasoned conspiracy theorist. Everything. When I asked my mom, she said that it was a secret and then I overheard both of my parents talking about me. And what did they say? Little Izuku asked as he quickly gained more and more interest. That I shouldn't know about the birds and the bees. Are they working together? But that Iida put on a smug smile and pulled a paper seemingly at random from the small stack. Here's what I think, the beehive isn't actually the home of the bees, but a human egg. Tenyu exclaimed and pointed at the drawing, which showed a small figure cramped into the small space. Whoa. And then, when the baby gets big enough the hive falls down, breaks and a bird takes the baby to the new family. That's so cool. But why do girls get so big when they are waiting for the baby? Suddenly Iida's eyes went wide open in shock. Oh no, another hole in my theory. He exclaimed as he picked up the pile and swiftly threw it into a nearby trash bin. Soon his shocked expression changed into a defeated one. When he saw the older boy's disappointment, Izuku began panicking. I am sorry. It's okay, I just thought I finally had it. Maybe I could help you, but before he had time to finish, Tenyu tightly grasped his shoulders. Really you would do that for me? Iida asked as if his energy magically recharged in an instant. Sure, but what do we do? We have to get more clues from someone trustworthy, but they can't be from a parent. And so the boys started planning the next step on their journey for enlightenment and after that started playing. 5 hours later. The small green-haired boy entered his new home with his mother after she picked him up at the daycare. So, what would you like for lunch today, Izuku? Fried chicken. He exclaimed and raised both of his hands triumphantly. Okay, but you have to eat your greens. She said warmly and petted his head. And with that Inko started preparing food in the kitchen while the boy sat down on the carpet in living room and turned on the television just as one of his favorite cartoons started. After a while the chicken was calmly sizzling on the stove and Inko joined her son and just watched him get excited about the silly story on the screen. The sun slowly disappeared behind dark clouds and soft rain was soon softly drumming on the windows, filling the apartment with calm atmosphere and the heavenly smell flowed from the kitchen. Just as the mother got up from the couch to boil some potatoes, the glass door to the balcony opened and soaked Toshinori quickly rushed inside. Who has the rest of the day off? He exclaimed. Wow, heroes have vacations, Izuku asked. Oh not really, but when the weather gets bad, it interferes with most quirks, so most of the villains stay home. All Might informed them with a beaming smile and made his way into the bathroom to get a nice warm shower as the weather began to worsen once again. While he showered and put on some clean civilian clothes, Inko prepared the table and another plate for the hero, and after 10 minutes all residents met around the dining table. There was little to no conversation, they were all just quietly enjoying their meal in peace. Toshinori repeatedly tried to thank the green-haired woman for the food, but she just brushed it off by telling him just how grateful she is that he had let them stay. After they finished Inko's phone rang, and the large hero immediately volunteered to take care of the dishes, which left him alone with Izuku in the kitchen, and the young boy quickly grasped the opportunity. Mr. All Might, can you help me with something? He asked nervously failing to meet the blond man's eyes. Toshinori looked at the boy with a bright smile, with his hand still concentrated on the dirty plate. Anything you need young man. He said cheerfully. I need to ask you something. All Might's smile faltered a bit, but he kept scrubbing. Well, then ask away. Please don't ask about my quirk, I can't trust a child with that information. Where do babies come from? And just like that Toshinori's hand involuntarily twitched from the shock and sent the plate soaring straight through the window. Oh, well another thing to replace. What was that question? Where do babies come from? Oh no, I heard him right. Even though the tall man kept a calm smile, his inner voice was suddenly sounding like teenage girls screeching while watching a rather gruesome horror movie. Why would you ask me that? Because we need to understand the secret of the birds and the bees. Birds and the bees, but wait. Who's we? My new friend wants to know. Izuku quickly answered and continued to expectantly stare at the hero who was starting to sweat. All Might was frantically thinking about an escape from this situation. Should he jump out of the window and search for the discarded plate? Should he fake a phone call? Yet after a look at the boy he knew that no matter what he did, Izuku would simply ask again later. And so he pulled his hands out of the kitchen sink, wiped them on his pants, and focused his attention completely at the boy. Listen young man, this isn't something you should discuss with me, why don't you ask your dad? The little boy looked down for a moment and sadness flashed over his face, and the tall man immediately regretted his question. I've never met my dad. He moved from Japan when I was super small, and I don't even remember how he looks, he said sadly, while averting his eyes from his favorite hero. Well then, why don't you ask your mother? No. If I ask her it won't be a secret anymore. Toshinori sighed, rubbed his forehead when an idea struck him. Okay, I will tell you later today, okay? Really thank you so much. Izuku said as he embraced one of his legs before running off. That evening. Inko tucked her son in bed and soon after she left, then just a few minutes later All Might slipped in with a very thick and old-looking book without her noticing. Are you ready to learn the secret, young man? Yeah. The small green-haired boy answered excitedly. And just like that Toshinori pulled up a chair next to the boy's bed and opened his book. It was a very old biology textbook from his days at the high school, which meant that there were no pictures and everything was written in long and boring paragraphs. Human reproduction is achieved through sexual intercourse. Sexual what? Izuku interrupted, already confused. All Might's smile just widened as he flipped a few pages forward and started reading again. Sexual intercourse or copulation is a reproductive act in which the male reproductive organ. What is an organ? So far Izuku couldn't understand a single thing, and these new words didn't help at all. But All Might just kept his smile and flipped what looked like at least 100 pages back, slowly and checking twice if he was going to the correct page. Organs are the body's recognizable structures. And so this little talk continued, and the boy's eyes started getting more and more tired, his eyelids heavier and heavier as All Might spoke and spoke ever so slowly, until the boy finally fell asleep, at which point the hero carefully closed his book and silently exited the room. It didn't solve the problem completely, but it gave him or to anybody else who would have to explain it to the boy at least 2 years of time, since he knew that a 4-year-old boy wouldn't ask about something so boring anytime soon. I hope you keep that innocence for as long as possible, young man. Feeling a bit thirsty from all that reading, he made his way into the kitchen, only to see Inko brewing herself some tea. Do you have enough hot water for one more cup, Miss Midoriya? The tall man asked happily as he sat down at the table. Of course, and you can call me Inko. Only if you call me Toshinori. He reminded her playfully. After a minute she also took a seat and the two started chatting a bit. It was a nice change for the hero to have someone he could talk to, it was a pleasant feeling which he lost when his training ended, and the mother seemed very interested by the hero, mainly by his ability to always remain cheerful. This conversation quickly changed though when All Might suddenly changed the subject. So where is Izuku's father anyway? He asked only to see her kind smile turn into a sad one. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to pry. No, it's nothing, my ex-husband, he left us before Izuku was even born, said that he wasn't ready to be someone's father, and then moved abroad. Did you get a divorce? Yes, but he still sends us money, and he even used to call and check on us, but not anymore. I am sorry to hear that. It must be very hard to look after Izuku on your own, said the large hero, but Inko immediately cheered up. Not at all actually, he has always been such a good boy, please give me a moment. She said, quickly stood up and swiftly walked to her room, only to return just a few seconds later with a photo album which she laid on the table, nearly spilling her tea in the process. They spent nearly half an hour looking at old pictures of Izuku and other children, while Inko described the situations during which they were taken. Then he saw what had to be the sweetest thing he had ever seen in his entire life. In this picture Izuku was sleeping in his All Might Odyssey, clutching a plushy version of the number one hero close to his chest whilst covered in blanket. He couldn't quite understand what, but something made his heart feel just a little more comfortable in its place when he looked at the picture. I gave him that Odyssey on his 3rd birthday, and he absolutely refused to take it off for 2 days. He even started crying when was supposed to take a bath. And what did you do? Inko giggled before giving him an answer. Well, I told him that only villains wear smelly clothes, and he nearly tore it in half trying to take it off. To which Toshinori burst out laughing heartily. They spent a few more minutes telling each other funny stories like this until they reached the end of the photo album and Inko put it back in her room, but after a while, both of them finished their tea and went their separate ways. Yet Toshinori couldn't get something out of his mind. Every time he made Inko smile with some dumb villain story, he just wanted to tell her another, just so he could watch her smile for a bit longer. It was a weird urge but not an unpleasant one. Chapter 8. The week has gone by and everything just slowly shifted into a routine. Every day Izuku woke up, brushed his teeth, ate breakfast and was taken to the daycare by a police car. Even his new weird suit and gloves became pretty much normal. Ever since he met him, Izuku's impression of Iida changed from malfunctioning robot into friendly robot, and after he managed to persuade him about the fact that this whole baby business contained mostly boredom and long difficult words, the two actually started having a pretty good time together. One day they would construct an extremely impressive structure from building blocks, and the next they would play a game of hide and seek so complicated it perplexed even their supervisors, which only led to further delight for the boys. In a slightly different way, friendship also slowly grew between Toshinori and Inko. Both soon noticed that whenever alone, they always had something interesting to talk about and overall, just enjoyed the company of each other. All Might sometimes found his head invaded by thoughts about the nice green-haired woman, just like the one right now. Does she like flowers? Would that be weird? Currently the number one hero was patrolling a busy street from a rooftop when he noticed a flower shop on the other side. What he failed to notice though was a villain who snuck silently behind him whilst holding a rather well-worn crowbar. He took a wide swing and hit All Might's shoulder with all of his power, and this action produced a rather nasty-sounding crunch. The tall man turned around and saw the guy in a ridiculous-looking red costume with a green skull badly painted on his chest, who just attacked him on the ground, holding his clearly dislocated wrist screeching in pain like a mad person. Sometimes you people just make it too easy, Toshinori said as he picked up the injured criminal by the collar, quickly determining from the villain's eyes that he was under the influence of something. He carefully jumped from the roof and called over a policeman who quickly arrested the wanted felon. After that people quickly surrounded the hero. He was just writing an autograph for a couple of kids when his hand froze, his mind once again invaded by a thought when his eyes met a small bakery just a few buildings away. Maybe something sweet would be better. Inko was meanwhile being pestered with questions by her friends about 20 blocks away in a small cafe. She at first wanted to refuse their invitation, thinking that it would make it harder for police to protect her family, but Toshinori managed to convince her to meet her friends, even though this required 2 officers dressed in civilian clothing, observing the whole group from a nearby table. "So did you see him naked?" asked her bespectacled short purple-haired friend from work suddenly, which instantly made Inko choke on her coffee and then gasp for air. "Takara, stop it," ordered the other friend throwing an angry look her way. "Come on Kichi, they live together and accidents happen," said Takara unapologetically, which made Inko blush even harder. "No. It's nothing like that," the green-haired woman forced out rather quickly. "Come on Inko, I work at HR and I can spot a liar from 100 yards away, did anything happen?" asked Takara again, not even bothering to hide her excitement. Well, the young mother started with scarlet still on her cheeks. 3 days ago. She woke up with her book on her stomach after a short nap. The green-haired woman stood up, stretched and decided to go for a shower. It was so nice to have everyday access to nearly endless supply of hot water that was always available. She chose the closest bathroom and opened the door only to see Toshinori in his fluffy pink bathrobe and a matching shower cap, brushing his teeth next to the mirror, with a happy smile still present on his face. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but due to the massive size of his body and his musculature, the bathrobe was just a few sizes too short, leaving his limbs mostly uncovered. Inko let out an involuntary squeak and after blurting out "I'm so sorry," swiftly closed the door, while All Might just shrugged and continued his brushing. In the present. So close and yet so far, muttered the short woman in glasses. How do you still work in HR, you little perv? Kichi remarked. And so, her two friends began to bicker like they always used to, which gave Inko a feeling of normalcy, and that was something she hasn't felt for a whole week. Meanwhile, her son was playing a new game with his friend when they were suddenly approached by a new face in the daycare. It was only her second day here and on the first one, she just felt too shy to talk to anybody, especially since she never had any friends at all. At that time this little girl only knew 5 people, and none of them were children. But today it was different. Just a minute ago she saw the taller of the two boys standing on one leg with his arms in a weird position next to his head, and so the shy girl, fueled by curiosity, walked a bit closer to observe them. The tree? Guessed the green-haired boy again, only to be met by silence. They were playing charades for a while, but now it seemed like Iida had finally won. Izuku has already tried to guess a fork, a tree, an antenna and a lamp. Now he had only one guess left before Iida could declare his ultimate victory. Maybe I'm just looking at him wrong, Izuku thought, and took a few quick steps back only to bump into someone with his shoulder. Sorry. Are you okay? He quickly said as he turned around and saw a girl slightly taller than him, who had the look of a deer caught in the headlights. I am okay. What are you doing? She forced out while dodging eye contact. We are playing charades. Wanna join? Join? She quickly averted her eyes to the ground as a slight blush flashed across her cheeks. Yes, sure. Awesome. Come on. The boy said excitedly and grasped her hand and led her closer to his friend. The black-haired girl was surprised by his gloves but didn't ask about them due to her shy nature. What do you think? About what? We need to guess what Tenya is. Haven't you ever played this game? Izuku asked with visible confusion, but the taller girl just shook her head. The green-haired boy then tried to explain the basic rules of the game to her. Luckily, she grasped the concept quickly. Iida was meanwhile utterly determined to win this match, and so he stood completely still, despite the cramp he felt in his leg, to avoid giving his opponents any hints. The victory is so close I can taste it. The candle holder. The girl suddenly blurted out, crushing his dream of victory. The tall boy lowered his head in defeat and took a step forward to shake hands with the victor, only to realize that his other leg fell asleep. His knee gave up on him, he lost his balance and fell straight on his face. The shorter boy had to suppress a chuckle as he helped his friend back on his feet. After a quick congratulation to the girl, it was Izuku's turn to pretend. He decided to make it easier for the new player. The green-haired boy spread his legs a little, put his hands on his hip, straightened his back and flashed a toothy smile, perfectly mimicking his favorite hero. Iida immediately knew what he was doing and chose to let her have the first guess, which was a decision he would soon regret. Momo looked for a while at the shorter boy, unsure and confused, but before long her eyes flashed, she smiled in recognition and exclaimed her answer. Broccoli. As soon as Izuku heard her utter that word, his smile dropped. That was so mean, he said sadly. Such savagery, commented Tenya in support. He couldn't believe that someone could compare his new friend to such a disgusting vegetable, but after he took a look at the shorter boy, he saw a resemblance, which he now couldn't unsee. I'm sorry. The girl said when she noticed the effect of her words. She didn't actually know how she managed to offend him, but after being nice to her, it just felt wrong to hurt him in any way, and she knew that she somehow did just that. You weren't making fun of me? Izuku asked, surprised as sadness vanished. And no, it's just your hair looks like you know. Broccoli. The green-haired boy finished for her. Yeah, but don't worry, that's not a bad thing. Mom says that broccoli is super healthy and everything. Thanks I guess, but that isn't what I was trying to do. Then what? All Might. Iida exclaimed before anyone else had the chance as he rose his hands in victory. What's an All Might? The girl asked sincerely, which made Izuku experience a feeling which is reserved for missionaries when they discover that someone has never heard about their Lord and Savior. He's the coolest hero in the universe. He said energetically as his mood once again changed, this time into blinding excitement. Izuku then swiftly ran off before returning with a comic book and an action figure in a few seconds. The duo spent next few hours introducing the new girl to the number one hero and watched her become more and more interested. They also learned her name and she told them that her family recently moved into a giant house with an even bigger garden. Did he really save 100 people in 10 minutes? Yeah, and he caught the villain who started the fire. He sounds so nice. The girl remarked with a wide smile. She was having such a blast right now that she didn't even notice it when one of the caretakers walked over to them. Momo, your mommy's here to pick you up, so say goodbye to your friends and let's go. She said with a gentle voice and a patient smile on her face. The woman hated to pull the black-haired girl away from the two boys. She cared deeply for every single child in her daycare, and it was so nice to see that the shy girl who looked scared of her own shadow just yesterday was already talking with other children. Can I stay for a few more minutes? She asked as her smile turned into a disappointed frown. I'm not sure, dear, your mother said that she's in a hurry. Momo sighed and turned sadly back to the boys. Goodbye, she weakly muttered. See you next time, Momo. They both said as she quickly left. Her mother, who was waiting outside, led the girl into an expensive car, but just as their driver put the car into gear, a smile once again made its home on the young girl's face when she saw her new friends furiously waving at her from the window of the daycare. 2 hours later. All Might entered the penthouse, carrying a shoe-sized pink box, and was immediately met by a heavenly smell of udon. Hi Toshinori, how was your day? The green-haired woman asked as she stirred the soup in the pot. Successful. 6 criminals and 2 villains arrested. He responded joyfully and rose his thumb on his free hand. What's in the box? Inko inquired as she finally noticed the package Toshinori held in his hand. The tall hero didn't respond, just set the box down on the table and opened it, revealing 12 neatly stacked cupcakes of different bright colors. Each one resembled a beautiful flower, and every single one generated a fascinating smell of fruit and vanilla. The beauty of this entire bouquet stunned Inko, and she didn't know what to say. The look of surprise mixing with fascination which appeared on her face somehow made All Might feel very happy inside. Hey Izuku, come take a look. Her son quickly came into the kitchen waving at the tall hero as he did so, and when he took a glance at the contents of the box, his eyes widened in astonishment. So pretty. Toshinori playfully ruffled the boy's hair as he walked past him to his room so he could get some normal clothing. Can I have one? Asked Izuku with little sparkles in his eyes, and it took all of Inko's determination to deny him the sweet treat before they had lunch. The lunch went as usual, with All Might relentlessly complimenting the green-haired woman on the quality of the food and her telling him again and again that it was no big deal at all, slowly becoming flustered, yet the big man still couldn't quite get used to home-cooked meals every day. Izuku was meanwhile trying to finish his own food as soon as possible, with the image of the promised cupcake still fresh on his mind. Will it be sweet or sour? Will it taste like strawberries or raspberries? Is it filled with cream or fruit? His thoughts were however suddenly interrupted as something wet and red landed right on his face as a loud splat was heard in the room. Izuku looked up from his udon, which was also colored red now, only to see All Might with his head lowered and his long blonde hair drenched in red liquid. There were also red and whitish chunks covering the entire table. Both son and his mother looked at All Might in horror until he suddenly shifted his head back into its natural position and reached into his hair, pulled out a rather large pink chunk, smelled it and then put it in his mouth. Cherry. He looked around and saw the pink box open with one cupcake missing. The number one hero quickly put 2 and 2 together. It was clear that he was just attacked by a wild pastry, yet one question remained. How? Yet that question had to wait when he saw the green-haired woman slowly slump in her chair. Luckily, he was fast enough to catch her before her head hit the floor, but the chair fell over in the process. Hey young man, can you give me a hand here? He said and watched as the little boy quickly ran over to him trying to help, but the chair suddenly moved by itself. At first it started violently shaking, then stood back on its four legs, and then quickly slid towards the boy. As soon as he saw it, Izuku turned around and started running for his life as the beautiful wooden chair gave chase. The villain Toshinori thought as he carefully put Inko on a couch in the living room before joining the race himself. He caught up to them pretty quickly, fast enough to see Izuku shut the door to his room and the chair banging on it with all its weight the next second. The hero quickly closed the distance to what he presumed was an angry object and grabbed it by one of its legs and tried to pull it back from the door, only for it to snap off like a twig. So not a villain. He tried again, this time grabbing it by the seat, yet the mysterious power pushing the chair into the room was so great, he could hardly move the annoying piece of furniture with normal strength alone, but thankfully using one for all, he succeeded and dragged the three-legged chair to the balcony, and with a grunt, he lobbed the possibly haunted item into the air. The object nearly broke through the sound barrier as it whizzed through the air, but then it slowly stopped and started quickly heading back. "Oh, so you want more? Fine by me." All Might's smile grew wider as he pulled back his arm, waiting for his target to close the distance between them. Smash. The chair was instantly reduced into thousands of splinters and the cloud slowly dispersed. At least that's what it looked like. Toshinori soon noticed that a small cloud stayed up in the air and was slowly approaching the penthouse. Before he could even react, it flew right past him at blinding speed. He watched the small swarm powerlessly as it flew through the living room right at Izuku, who must have left his room when the commotion died down. The little boy hid his face behind his hands and waited for a pain to come, which it never did. The whole cloud of sharp wood stopped just a foot away from him, softly and calmly floating around his tiny body. Another quirk. Izuku gasped when he saw these little wooden spears passively levitating and reached out to pick one from the air, only to see it softly glide into his open hand. He stared at it in wonder before letting it go so it could join its brothers and sisters in their quiet aerial ballet. All Might carefully but quickly approached the green-haired boy, looking him over for any injuries only to find none. To say that the large man was relieved would be an understatement. "Hey All Might, what do I do?" he asked in uncertainty, and a few insignificant drops of nervous sweat appeared on his forehead. Maybe try to calm down, it's probably just your quirk acting up." How do I do that? I'm scared." He squeaked out nervously as the little pieces started slowly gaining speed and rotating around his body, which forced the boy to gasp again in fear. "Hey, it's gonna be okay, I am here." All Might said as he carefully reached through the flying fragments, ignoring the sting on his arm, and placed his hand on the trembling boy's shoulder. Just breath slowly in and out. Izuku did just that, and one after the other the pieces fell to the ground, creating a small circle-shaped even pile around the green-haired boy's feet. When the child noticed this, he fell on the ground and began softly sobbing. When Toshinori saw this, the big man went down to his knees and pulled the boy into a warm and surprisingly soft embrace. After about a minute, the boy's sobbing stopped and All Might released his gentle grip before taking a small step back. And in this heartfelt moment, rather large chunks still present in the hero's blonde hair decided to fall and splat on the ground. The sight was so absurd, it made Izuku start quietly giggle, and soon the muscular hero completed the scene with his hearty laugh. After they woke up Inko and explained what happened, she too was relieved to see that the number one hero was still alive and kicking, and shocked to discover how her own quirk changed inside her son. And so they cleaned up the mess, ate some more udon, and finished their meal with some truly delectable cupcakes, and even though it was a beautiful break from all the chaos of the hero life, All Might soon realized what time it was. He hastily put on his suit, said goodbye to the family and went back on his patrol. The League of Villains hideout, 2 a.m. Nishioka Toga entered the bar, which never seemed to appear as open, with a revolver strapped to his waist. He was a minor villain who specialized in frauds, which was extremely easy for him since could change his appearance into that of any person he chose. The only downside of his ability was the inability to change his body again for approximately 1 month. He had done this so many times he completely forgot how his original face and body even looked like, not that he cared much. Earlier today he was contacted by the League with a job offer, so he sat down and waited for the people he was supposed to meet while nursing a drink provided by the figure made of thick black smoke. About half an hour passed as two people entered the bar. One of them was a rather short-looking fellow with a mustache dressed in a grey business suit and pants, while the other had a muscular figure in black pants and hoodie. They both took a seat next to him, and each one ordered a large glass of beer as they began to discuss the job. He would need to change into someone with white hair and a horrible facial deformity to posse as someone named Shigaraki for a few months before disappearing. He was happy with this offer, especially when he learned that his payment would be 10 million yen now and another 20 million after he returned, though his happiness faltered when they showed him the picture of the person he would be mimicking. "How's this guy even still alive?" "That's none of your concern," said the shorter man, dismissing his question. They discussed some fine details, gave him another set of clothing, and watched as he fine-tuned his body and face. Satisfied with the result, handed Nishioka a black suitcase filled to the brim with money. He picked it up and got ready to head out when the shorter man stopped him. "Good luck," he said as he offered his right hand for a handshake, which the man eagerly accepted. He hadn't realized, however, when the mustached man tightly clasped his other hand from the other side, preventing Nishioka from reaching for his pistol. He had no way to defend himself when the guy in a hoodie pulled out a large knife, which he then buried between the shapeshifter's ribs. Chapter 9. The dim lights of the city morgue had strange effects on people who weren't used to them. Many became nervous at the first sight of them, and some would even swear that they saw ghosts immediately after entering. All Might was luckily unaffected by these feelings as he walked calmly through the building with Namasa by his side, leading him through the maze of hallways. The detective wasn't so lucky though. Even if the place itself didn't have such effect, the absence of the iconic smile on the hero's face sure did. After a minute of walking, they reached their goal. It was a plain room with two doors, a glass wall and a metal table covered with a piece of white fabric in the middle of it. It was used for identifying bodies, since it felt much friendlier and cleaner than the morgue itself, and it was only rarely used. Most of the times all that the detectives needed to confirm the body's identity was a face photo of the deceased person. This was different though. All Might needed to be absolutely sure about if the man who was fished out of a small river earlier today was the same man who murdered his teacher and previous owner of One for All, and so he asked to see the body with his own two eyes after being presented with a photo. There was a man in his late 30s with long curly jet black hair waiting for them. He introduced himself as the head medical examiner who performed the autopsy and led them over to the table. All Might waited with serious frown on his face as the white fabric was revealed, and then he came face to face with a man he felt nothing but hatred for. All for one. Is that really him? Namasa asked Toshinori firmly, though he could already tell what the answer was from the hero's look. Yes, it's Shigaraki. He responded, yet his face remained unreadable. What killed him, doctor? I found 2 stab wounds. The first caused one of his lungs to collapse, he said before showing the wounds to the detective. And the second one went right through the aorta, killing him instantly. I also noticed some minor bruising on his right hand. So there was a struggle. Namasa said as he wrote the information into his small notepad. It's possible, but I have not found from injuries from self-defense. Normally when someone's attacked with a knife they try to grab it or put their hands between them and the attacker, but as you can see there are no cuts. It was then when both men noticed the intensity with which All Might watched the corpse. It was like he was waiting for the villain to come back from death and attack them in a second. All Might, are you okay? Asked a detective, worried for his friend. When he touched the hero's shoulder, the large man flinched as if he came back from a trance. Yeah, I'm fine, it's just. What's wrong? Could you and Doc give me a few minutes alone with him? Namasa and the detective exchanged a brief look before they nodded. Take your time, said the man who dissected his enemy as he and the detective made their way out of the room and headed to the closest coffee machine. It was not a normal request and a one which would normally be denied, but they both knew that if there was a person they could put their trust into, it was the number one hero. A few seconds after the door closed after them, All Might let out a sigh and a small smile appeared on his face. You want to know something? He asked silently, and after being met by nothing but more silence he continued. I really thought that it was my end. He locked his bright blue eyes with Shigaraki's lifeless ones. When I was bleeding out on the floor, I thought that this is how I die, this is how One for All dies. His right hand slowly formed into a hard fist. "But the life of my master and the lives of every previous holder, that they would be all for nothing." He took a step towards the glass on the wall and looked at the empty room behind it. "You know, it was 2 or maybe 3 years ago when they called me here. I was standing just behind this glass and they showed me a young dead hero." His face was beaten beyond recognition. He had no family, no close friends. It was just him and his team. He was the only one of them that we found. He took a calming breath before continuing. All Might remembered the boy well. He had scars all over his body, they were the side effect of his quirk. Yet he didn't mind them too much. He went into a hero program and worked through his pain just so he could do an incredibly hard and dangerous job. People like that made even the #1 hero feel small in comparison. Toshinori met the younger hero just 4 days before some police officer found his lifeless body under a large pine tree in a park. At that time, the #1 hero was the only one who could identify the core. "It's so hard to believe that you are here laying on the same table he did all those years ago, with pretty much the same face, and maybe even killed by the same people." All Might could see something poetic in what he just stated. It had really shown how fickle a life of a villain was. But the funny thing is that somewhere very deep inside, there is a very small part of me which almost wants to thank you. Toshinori admitted as he pulled up a chair next to the table. "Before you almost killed me, I only had one thing, and that was my mission to find you and to make sure that you don't hurt anyone ever again. But since I woke up in just a week, I no longer feel lonely, and now for the first time there are 2 people with one for all. And I strongly believe that the boy will one day become a much better and stronger hero than me," he said as his smile disappeared. "During your entire life, all you did was hurt and manipulate people just to achieve your goals, but don't think your death changes anything. We will hunt down every single villain and criminal, and we won't stop until everyone on this world has the ability to smile, and I hope that you take that to your grave." All Might declared angrily and roughly covered the dead man's face before leaving the room. It didn't take long for him to find the 2 men, and after some small amount of paperwork he was ready to leave when the medical examiner approached him. "I hope you don't mind, but could I get an autograph for my son? He's a big fan of pro heroes." "Sure. What's his name?" All Might responded with his bright smile once again present on his face as he took the offered pen and paper. "It's Fumikage. Dear Fumikage, always try your best and you will be sure to succeed. Signed, All Might." He swiftly wrote before he handed the short message back to the boy's father and left the grim building, ready to begin a new part of his life. After the death of All for One, the case was quickly concluded, and even though the missing doctor was still at large, he was classified as a low-level threat without his boss. As you might have guessed, this meant that the Midoriyas were taken out of the protection program after the week it took for the paperwork to go through. This week has been different. Especially for Inko. Sometimes when she met Toshinori in the penthouse, he gave her this weird nervous look, and after a short awkward conversation he quickly left. Everything reached the peak when there was only 1 day remaining. By that point All Might was doing pretty much anything just to avoid the green-haired woman, which is why Inko was so surprised when she heard someone knock on her door when she was filling her large suitcase with clothes. "Come in," the woman said with a feeling of uncertainty manifesting itself in her voice. The door then opened and revealed Toshinori with a strange twitching smile. It was a sight which unnerved her even more. "Oh my Toshinori, are you feeling okay? You look so tense. Is there something wrong?" she asked nervously as she took a step forward. The #1 hero was taken aback for a second but quickly recovered. Even though before he had the chance to answer her question his hand shot up to his head and started furiously rubbing an itch which wasn't there to begin with. "Yes, no, wait, no, I mean yes, and I practiced this so many times, wait, let me start over," All Might sighed tiredly. A faint smile briefly appeared on Inko's face before disappearing as she looked at the floor sadly. "Maybe I know what you are trying to say." "You do?" "Yes, I think so, after all you have been so patient with us." "Wait, patient? I mean, you have to hate it that those people from the government forced you to let us live here, don't you?" "I am sorry," she said with an expression that could be only replicated by a kicked puppy before lowering her head. All Might was so surprised by her words that his own just couldn't make their way out of his mind into his mouth. So, he just stared at her silently for a few seconds. No. When she heard that one word she looked back at the blonde man questioningly. It's not like that. The number one hero said and closed the distance between them. But why were you acting so weird? I hardly even saw you this week. I had to tell you something and didn't want to mess it up, but every time I tried to bring it up, the words just scrambled every time I tried to speak with you. Just then Inko noticed how close the tall man was to her and her face slightly reddened. I wanted to tell you that even after all this blows over and even if there is zero chance of danger for you or for your son, you are both more than welcome to stay here. We can stay, a loud voice exclaimed from behind the door. It squeaked open and Izuku stuck his head through. Izuku. It's very impolite to eavesdrop on other people. She reprimanded her son angrily, even though the green-haired boy seemed completely unaffected by her words, as he ran over to his mom, grasped her pant leg, and started jumping up and down with joy. Does it mean I can play Tenya and Momo again? Izuku asked hopefully. Both adults noticed just how bummed he looked when Inko told him that he would have to return back to his old kindergarten soon. But don't you miss Kitsuki? I thought you two were friends. Izuku frowned for a second before answering. But Kakin has many friends and he's always angry at me. The little green-haired boy sadly admitted. His mother first looked at the boy's sad yet somehow still hopeful expression and then at All Might's face adorned by an honest smile. Inko sighed, she knew that Toshinori was everything but dishonest, but to move in with someone just like that. It was true that the big guy was one of the nicest people she had ever met and her son absolutely adored him. It was also very nice to have someone at home she could talk to and trust. But living with a number one hero, it just seemed like too much to take in. Hey Izuku, could you bring me mommy her phone? It's in my bag. Sure, mom. The green-haired boy yelled hurriedly and ran to the living room. Once he left her room, Inko focused her attention back on Toshinori. Look, you are a really nice guy and I appreciate your offer, but we can't stay here. She quietly said. After those words left her mouth, she saw something which was very rare, the hero's smile slowly left his face and was promptly replaced by a disappointed frown. I see. But may I ask why? The tall man couldn't help himself, he needed to know what was wrong before he could even fathom losing his new roommates. Why? Just think about it. An unmarried woman and her child living with an unmarried man who has the same quirk as her son, how do you think people will react to that? Is she worried about me? I don't want to cause you more trouble. The absurdity of this entire situation finally hit All Might and he wanted to keep it down, but the entire penthouse was soon filled with his hearty laughter which shocked Inko. Ah ha ha, I am sorry, it's just that you are such a wonderful person. After a few more chuckles, the hero got his laughter under control. Her answer made him feel miserable. Toshinori feared that she found his energetic nature or maybe their conversations annoying, or that maybe she blamed him for sudden presence of the government in both her son's lives. Yet it was this simple reason which only showed her selflessness more. Please take this seriously. The green-haired mother pleaded, clearly flustered by the hero's strange response. I do, but I am a hero because I love to make people feel safe, not for good press and PR, so if that is your only concern, then there is nothing to worry about. All Might declared happily as his trademark smile returned to his face. Inko searched his face for any sign of dishonesty or nervousness, but there was nothing, the number one hero was completely frank with her. She looked around herself as she again noticed the fanciness and luxury of the place around her. She always wanted her son to be brought up in a place like this, with a strong role model he could look up to, but her meager salary and the absence of her ex-husband was something she always saw as a gigantic impassable barrier to that goal. But now, that barrier was shattered by this single offer. But how can you be so nice? You barely even know me or my son and yet, you would welcome us to live with you? She asked after she sat down on her bed and tried to wrap her head around the situation which she was currently facing. I know it's a lot to take in, but I don't need your answer right now, sleep on it and tell me when you make your decision, just please remember this, the time the three of us spent here, no matter how brief, is something I will treasure forever. And with that he left her room and carefully closed the door behind himself. After that he made his way back to his own bedroom and collapsed on his bed and hid his blushing face in his arms from the feeling of embarrassment caused by the cheesiness of his own words. At night Inko hardly slept, she was busy thinking about the offer, but more importantly about her own thoughts. Why can't I just say yes? She knew that this was a serious offer, but there were also no strings attached, yet there was still something which held her back from accepting a better and easier life for her and for Izuku, yet she couldn't put her finger on it. The man was the manifestation of niceness, but he also made her feel a bit nervous whenever she tried talking to him, and he always looked so funny and cute while reasoning with Izuku. Ugh, come on, get yourself together. You are a single mother with a dead-end office job, and he's the #1 hero. It would never work. She said quietly to herself and flipped over facing away from the window. But he wants us to stay. Reminded her another thought. No, he doesn't, Toshinori is just very polite. After a while and many similar thoughts, she was finally able to reach a dreamless slumber. Unbeknownst to her, All Might was just following a train of thoughts thematically very similar to her own as he chased after a flying villain with biology comparable to a parrot through the night. Maybe I came on too strong, if only the damn geezer was any help at all. He took another leap from a random rooftop as his mind drifted to what his short-bearded master told him 3 days ago. If you really like her, just put a baby in her and the rest will resolve itself on its own. Those words still made All Might feel uncomfortable. The villain took a sharp turn into an alleyway, nearly losing the large plastic bag with stolen jewelry. This hover didn't slow the hero at all, he just turned around in the air, waited for the right moment until his back was aimed straight at the other flying figure before. New Hampshire smash. He yelled as he punched the air, which propelled him straight at the winged villain. Maybe I should just tell her that I like her, but his mind quickly rejected that thought when he grabbed the brightly colored criminal by the wing as he sailed past him and sent them both tumbling from the mid-air straight into a tall hedgerow which stood around rather small hotel just past the alleyway. Before the birdman could make another escape attempt, Toshinori seized his feet with large sharp black talons, flipped him upside down, and began carrying him and the stolen property to the nearest police station, whilst ignoring the man's protests and his attempts to assault the #1 hero with his beak. But the dangerous situation already over his mind drifted back to the green-haired woman. It was not that he was afraid to tell her, just that he had no idea how to tell her. Being a #1 hero was great and all, but it hardly left him with any time for relationships. To be honest, the last time he dated someone was back in the middle school before Nana scouted him. Now trying to flirt was like trying to start a car with no wheels and covered in rust, which has been also standing in the driveway for 10 years. But the angry parrot delivered to a cage at the police station, All Might adjusted his blue cape and resumed his patrol. The next day, when the hero returned, he spotted a good sign the moment he entered through the balcony. There were no bags or suitcases prepared, though his optimism was quickly put to the test when he saw Inko in the living room nursing a cup of tea. She looked very tired and nervous, but as soon as she saw him the woman quickly put down her cup and stood up. "Hello Toshinori, want some tea?" she asked awkwardly and made her way towards the kettle. "No, it's okay, I'm not thirsty," he replied in similar fashion, once again lacking the knowledge what to do with his hands. "Come on, pull yourself together, today you dealt with a man-parrot robber, woman with knives in place of her fingers holding a hostage, and some weird pervert trying to hypnotize young women with his pheromones. She's not gonna bite. So, I have given it some thought," and she started as she put the kettle back down, leaving All Might nervous like a teenager on his first ever date. Here comes the rejection. "I thought, well, maybe we should try it and see how it goes, I mean we can always leave whenever we want to, right?" She swiftly half said half whispered, perfectly emulating her inner schoolgirl perfectly, and finished the performance with a nervous chuckle. The tall man was happy, relieved and overjoyed by the news, but also panicky because now he didn't know how to respond. So his brain did the weird bad thing only tired brains do. "Funny you should say that, tonight I found a wanted kidnapper who said exactly that to her victims before." Then mid-word he noticed the look she was now giving him and made himself stop. And not that I'm saying that you look like a suspected felon, I just lose my mind because you are so pretty. If before he stepped on a rake, now he put his foot on an active landmine. Both adults froze once the word pretty left Toshinori's mouth, and silence enveloped the room. Both just looked at each other awkwardly for a few seconds until All Might decided to put an end to this weird interaction as quickly as possible. Well, that was enough action for one day, I need to get some rest. He announced and quickly made his way into his room. And so Inko was left in the kitchen with a single thought. Did that just happen? The situation between the two was awkward for next few days, but luckily Izuku was always somehow able to defuse the weird atmosphere, and soon the two adults started acting normal around each other again. Yet there was something that weighed heavily on the mind of the 4-year-old. He still remembered what he said to the scarred boy that night. "Let's talk later." It was almost like a promise, and he felt bad about the possibility of not being able to keep it. Which is why he was now staring at a tourist map, which he had smuggled under his protective suit into the daycare with Iida and Momo. It was useless though, since none of them knew how to read. After this failure his mood even worsened. He couldn't ask his mother for help because Izuku knew that if she found out about this, she would be very angry and probably even sad, and he didn't want to bother All Might either, since the hero was very overworked since several big villains started fighting among each other. But then one day, there was a breakthrough in his search. "Your grandma's birthday?" asked Iida after hearing the news. "Yes. We are having a party and Dad said that I can invite you too," she said excitedly, which made both boys smile after they exchanged a look and a nod. "Sure, of course we'll come," Izuku affirmed. The event took place after a few days, and it was as snobby and majestic as you can imagine. The three friends still had fun though. Momo's grandmother was a very gentle but energetic old lady, and when she met the two boys, each of them ended up with a pinch on the cheek and a piece of very expensive Belgian chocolate. There was even a large trampoline set up behind the house for the children, which they immediately fell in love with. And that's how they spent most of the party, jumping up and down and giggling like there was no tomorrow. That was until Izuku activated his quirk by mistake and made a jump so high, it led him to see over the mansion's hedge and the entire garden. It allowed him to catch a glimpse of the house he was searching for, just a few blocks away. The next second he fell back down from the sky with a loud crash and a creak from the trampoline. "Are you okay?" asked Iida nervously as both him and Momo rushed over to him, but Izuku quickly stood back up, looking perfectly fine. "I saw the house, it's this way," the green-haired boy said and excitedly pointed in the direction of the house. His friends were at first skeptical, but when they saw the boy's excitement, they knew that he wasn't making it up. "I have to see him," announced Izuku with determination. Iida and Momo exchanged a worried look before turning their attention back at the green-haired boy. "Izuku, you can't do that, you would get in so much trouble." Tenyu tried to reason with him with little to no success. The shorter boy just flinched for a fraction of a second and then steeled himself. "But I really have to, I gave him a promise," declared the boy, but before he could anything stupid the girl spoke up. "But if you do that, everyone will look for you and it will ruin Grandma's birthday," she pleaded, but this time the boy's determination slowly drained from his face. He suddenly looked extremely disappointed and it almost seemed like he would start crying out of frustration. But then an idea appeared in his mind. What if I bring him here? He tried again and this time, his friends didn't look so concerned yet the boy with glasses was already preparing to reason with Izuku yet before he could utter a single word. "That could work," said Momo. "Impossible. You are with him," Iida exclaimed and started accusingly pointing his arms at both of them. "Come on, Tenya. It will be fine," Izuku tried to calm his panicking bespectacled friend. "No, it won't. They will find out about what we did and then we will end up in the prison for juveniles where there is no candy," Iida exclaimed, his panic from potentially breaking the rules reaching an entirely different level. "So will you help us?" asked Izuku as both him and Momo deployed their strongest puppy dog eyes. Iida stared at them defiantly, but inside he was slowly beginning to melt. He knew that these two were his only real friends, and his brother once said to him that a real hero must never turn his back on a true friend. His firm expression slowly broke down. Fine, but if we get grounded, I am holding both. How you're responsible. He announced, pointing his hands at them, which only made both of his friends smile. And so, the group started planning. First, they found an empty paper plate and started drawing on it with crayons from Momo's room. The plan was simple, they would create a fake Izuku, using Momo's quirk, and then use the doppelganger to make everyone believe that the boy was still present, whilst Midoriya would somehow sneak out and bring back the boy with him, so they could hang out like promised. The figurine created out of the upper half of an armless mannequin they found in the attic was hardly convincing. But when armed with a green wig provided by Momo, Izuku's t-shirt and shorts, which he thankfully didn't need since he was also wearing his protective suit, and his face masterfully drawn on it by Iida, it could be mistaken for the boy from the right distance. And so they took the abomination into a secluded part of the garden and hid it behind a bush where it was hardly visible, while the two actual children made it look as if they were playing hide and seek, failing to find the green-haired boy. Said boy was meanwhile furiously trying to find a way to sneak out. The gate of the manor, which belonged to Yaoi Orizus, was currently closed and under surveillance from a single guard. The fence was too high to climb over. This meant that to be successful, he would need to use his quirk somehow, but he had no idea how to jump there and get back with the red and white-haired boy. But his dilemma was answered when he found a big old red rusted wheelbarrow without any wheels and remembered the chair accident. With that thought in mind, he sat into the broken piece of gardening equipment. Now fly. He shouted and at the same time slapped the rusty metal, yet it remained stationary. Come on, how do I do this? Maybe that breathing no weight that was supposed to make it stop. Izuku then had an idea to get out of the piece of junk and check if it wasn't stuck to the ground or something, and just when he did reach over the edge and touch the soft ground for support, the old piece of trash suddenly flipped right under him and trapped him in a metal cocoon. Feeling scared of the dark, he panicked and tried to push the thing up, but the moment his fingertip made contact with the wheelbarrow it took off upside down, straight into the sky without him. He watched in terror as the red shape quickly disappeared in clouds. No, no, no. Get back here. He shouted and made a step back, trying to get a better look, only to trip over a branch and fall to the ground. Then right when he felt his hand touch the soft grass, the flying object appeared again, and this time it was actually coming straight at him with blinding speed and yellowish red trail of fire behind it. Izuku tried to crawl back, but the thing just adjusted its trajectory or remained aimed straight at him and quickly closed the distance. The green-haired boy screamed and put his hands up, trying to protect himself, but the pain didn't come. Instead, the still red-hot piece of metal stopped just a foot away from the boy's face and sent a gust of warm air at him. Izuku stared at the object, his green eyes filled with distrust, yet the hovering object was looking just as innocent as when he found it. The boy took a step back and the thing followed. He took a step towards it and it flew away from him. Okay, how do I make this work? He thought as he put his hand on his chin. And the thing slowly rose with his hand. After obtaining this new knowledge, he tried moving his hand down and the wheelbarrow softly touched down. That is so awesome. And then he felt it. It was almost like an invisible thread from his hand connected to the object. Whenever he spun his hand the thing turned to one side or the other, whenever he moved his hand forward the thing moved away and so on. He spent about a few minutes experimenting like this until he found out that when he closed his hand into a fist the wheelbarrow stopped responding, and when he opened it just a little the piece of metal moved much slower. He knew it was ready for a test drive. Meanwhile at the Todoroki abode, Shoto was recovering from his brutal training by the window. Ever since his eye fully recovered, his dad was pushing him harder than ever. His entire body was screaming at him from exhaustion, and he felt the need to lie down and rest, but the boy resisted the urge. He would not let his father defeat him like this ever again. The man in question left just half an hour ago to go on his patrol. The boy with dual quirk closed his eyes for a minute to give them some rest, only to open them in shock just a few seconds later as something gently nudged his shoulder. His eyes swiftly focused at the hand and then at the boy connected to it. He nearly fell over when he saw the face framed by green hair looking at him. Izuku, he asked, surprised when he came back to his senses. He also noticed the great amount of leaves and small pieces of branches stuck in the short boy's hair. Hello. Come outside. urged the green-haired boy happily with a small wave as he touched down in the front yard. Shoto rushed outside to see the other boy cough up a few small leaves into his hand, which he quickly threw over his shoulder and focused his attention back on him. Young Todoroki looked the green-haired boy from head to toe, then at the red wheelbarrow, and a question appeared in his mind, one which he didn't wait long to share. "Are you an alien?" He blurted out and earned himself a surprised look. "No, I am not," he said defensively, then stopped himself and started muttering something about being an alien and not knowing about it, which quickly made the other boy smile, even though he had a feeling that if he didn't stop him, a much more important question would remain unaddressed. "Why are you here anyway? If Dad finds you here, he will get really mad," Todoroki said as he quickly looked around worried that someone was watching them, even though his older siblings would probably not rat him out. The same couldn't be said for the caretaker. "I'm here for you, do you want to come play out with us?" the green-haired boy asked with a friendly smile on his face. "What do you mean? I can't just leave like that," Shoto protested, he felt stunned that the other boy even said something like that. "There is a birthday party not far away and I came to invite you," Izuku explained as he shyly offered his hand to help the taller boy into his makeshift airplane. It was not that Shoto didn't celebrate birthdays, they did, but it could hardly be called a party. There were a few presents exchanged, and each one of his siblings as well as his mom wished him a happy birthday, but that was about it. "Hey, don't worry, I will get you back home, I promise," Izuku happily encouraged when he saw his hesitation. Todoroki gave the boy a doubtful look. He was experiencing an extremely weird feeling, even though he barely even knew the boy, the scarred boy felt as if he could somehow trust him. There was just no malicious intent in his green eyes, just an unnatural amount of excitement. And so, he took the offered hand and stepped in the strange vehicle. "Okay, just hold on tight, I don't know how this works." "Wait, what do you mean?" Though the question died on his lips when the wheelbarrow swiftly took off. Shoto was holding on for dear life as the object zigzagged through the air. Luckily his quirk allowed him to create a handlebar of ice. A few moments later, Shoto opened his eyes, which he closed when they came face to face with a large tree just a few seconds ago, and luckily, they were on the ground, even though that didn't stop his hands from shaking. "Why, you are crazy," he forced out, still shaking like a chihuahua as he left the previously flying object. He then took a look at his pilot, which nearly made him laugh, since Izuku was now sporting a large green beard from all the leaves that got stuck to his face during landing. The boys reduced the mess on their clothes and hair as much as possible and began to make their way back to the birthday party. They didn't get very far. "Izuku!" shouted Iida when he saw his friend approaching. He and Momo quickly hurried over to him, only come face to face with a boy they had never seen before. "Hi guys." Tenya nearly missed his friend's greetings as his eyes narrowed when he saw the boy with a scar. "Izuku, you are kidding, right? We can bring this guy with us, look at him," the highest of them exclaimed as he swiftly closed the distance between. "What's your problem?" asked Shoto, clearly affected by what the bespectacled boy said. Yet the boy with blue hair ignored this and walked right up to him. "Well, if you are not gonna do it, then I have to," said Iida, and even though Todoroki wasn't sure about what Tenya was talking, he understood that this guy was looking for a fight, and he also knew that after today's training, he had no real way to protect himself. It surprised him greatly when the tall boy dropped on his knee and swiftly retied his shoelaces before pulling a hairbrush out of his pocket and fixing his two-colored hair. "Okay, all better," Tenya announced, turned around and began walking to the party. "He just does that sometimes," Izuku informed Todoroki when he noticed his confusion. "Why doesn't he brush your hair?" asked Shoto as they also began walking again. "Because his bed hair is unfixable," declared Iida, clearly frustrated by the fact. Luckily there were enough children on the party that no one noticed it when one more was added into the mix, and so right after Shoto introduced himself, the newly formed quartet was free to play as many games and eat as many sweets as they wanted. This was all completely new for the young Todoroki, but he soon understood that people chasing after him in the game of tag were not trying to attack him, or that hide and seek was no secret ploy to get rid of him. For the first time in his short life, he felt truly happy. It was so much fun hanging out with this group of other kids that the entire afternoon passed in the blink of an eye. Izuku honored his promise, and just as the guests began to leave, he managed to sneak Shoto back home, this time slightly more skillfully. It was hard to say goodbye to his new friends, but thanks to another promise from the green-haired boy, he was absolutely sure he would meet them again. The situation didn't change too much at the penthouse, and the Midoriya family decided to stay for another week. Inko returned back to her office job since she didn't want to be just a freeloader, and after a month both her and Toshinori found enough courage to share their feelings for each other, which only grew over time. Then after another week they began openly dating. Even though there was some media coverage of this, the public soon accepted the fact that the number one hero was no longer single. After half a year Inko even sold her old apartment, and after a year the group of roommates began living like a proper family. "Okay, it's ready everyone, say cheese," announced All Might as he set the camera on the table and hurried at nearly sonic speed to take his place behind the boy and his mother. "Cheese," they all said simultaneously as the flash of the camera blinded them. Today was a very special day. One that deserved to be documented as such. It was Izuku's first ever school day. Both his mom and the number one hero spent a lot of time when they were trying to choose the best possible school for the boy out of the options available to them. It was a school which was not very far, it had many clubs to choose from, a brand new gym, great overall ratings, and if that was not enough, the school was in an area where villain activity was nearly non-existent for 3 years and counting. Past 2 years were surprisingly uneventful after All Might and the other top heroes stopped the infighting between powerful villains which started after the death of All for One, and now the crime rate was at the all-time low. Heroes had much more time for their own lives, the economy was blossoming, and people felt much safer. All Might soon found himself with a lot of free time and spent most of it either with Izuku and Inko or making commercials. It especially entertained him when he watched Izuku whilst the little boy got excited over cartoons on the TV. The big man even began to transport the boy into the daycare, which caused major unrest in the facility. The little green-haired boy was under constant fire of questions once the hero left. His friends were shocked that he managed to hold this secret from them, but after an endless chain of teary apologies and a promise to get them both autographs, they forgave him. Shoto was flabbergasted by this news and had no idea how to react to it. Just imagine that one day you find out that the friend with whom you have been spending time for a month lives not only with one of the most famous people on the planet, but also your father's rival. Though before Todoroki had any real chance to feel anger, he was presented with an apology and a peace offering in the form of a firecracker popsicle. It wasn't anything unusual for the green-haired boy to bring candy with him when he visited his scarred friend. It took some time, but they perfected the process of sneaking into the house of the number 2 hero. Once every week Izuku and Iida would visit Momo to play, and once there, they would make some sort of distraction, which allowed the shorter of them to pick up Shoto and bring him back with him. It wasn't just an example of perfect planning on Iida's part, but it also allowed Midoriya to train his flight skills. Before, he had a serious problem trying to control even a single flying object, but now he was able to shuffle cards in the air, even if it was still very difficult. The 4 of them quickly became great friends, and the main trio celebrated every birthday together. Tenya soon felt as if he gained 2 younger brothers and a sister, which he needed to protect from any and all dumb ideas. Momo finally gained test subjects for the makeup products she had appropriated from her mother's stash, and Shoto was always so happy to be included in some way no matter what they were doing. For the first time in his life, Izuku knew what it meant to have real friends, which is also why it came as such a shock when he discovered that they wouldn't spend much time together in the future. Like it or not, his friends lived very far apart, and if it wasn't for the special daycare they would have never even met each other. Yet there was something that would always keep them together, something stronger than any villain they could ever meet. They all had the same dream to become heroes. So, when their last day together in the daycare finally came to its end, they all promised to become the best heroes the world has ever seen. Inko felt like crying for what seemed like the 8th time today as she looked at her son who was all nice and dressed up for the first real big step in his life. "Do you have your snacks?" she asked worriedly as she checked him over again. "Yes, Mom." Let's go. He exclaimed happily as he reached out for her to take her hand, and when he felt her fingers gently wrapped around his tiny ones, he began pulling her to the exit. So cute. Thought Toshinori as he took one last picture before putting down his camera. Izuku was so excited to finally go to a school, but not just because he would meet new people, but also due to the fact that the number one hero gave him a special promise. -8 months ago. Uncle Toshinori. Can we start today? The green-haired boy shouted for the third time this week dressed in his All Might pajamas as he latched onto the big man's leg the moment he left his bedroom. Maybe it was the cute nickname or the determination, which was basically radiating off the boy, but the number one hero had a hard time rejecting the boy's advances lately. "No, Izuku, it's too early," he said with a sigh. "But I will try very hard, I want to be as strong as you," Izuku argued enthusiastically. All Might gave the boy a long look contemplating the pros and the cons, but no matter how he looked at it, the boy in front of him was not ready yet. "Tell you what, we will start after you start going to school. How does that sound?" "Pinky promise." "Pinky promise." The hero agreed and poked the boy's nose with his pinky. "Present." Inko led her son through the buzzing city slowly, teaching him how to safely cross the road, what he should do if a stranger tries to talk to him, how traffic lights work and so on. She did everything to ensure that her Izuku not only get safely to his school, but also that he will soon be able to make his way there without her. It didn't take long for her to find his classroom, since there were many other parents here, and soon, she found herself standing in front of their goal hand in hand with her son. "Are you ready?" she asked Izuku as she looked down on him with a warm smile, and he in return gave her a small nod and a brave smile, before letting go of her hand and entering the classroom. This was a very interesting day for little Izuku. His teacher, Miss Taka, explained to them how school works, what is recess and what they would learn. The green-haired boy was excited that he would finally be able to read about his favorite heroes in magazines he always stared at when his mom took him to the store for ice cream. On the first day, their teacher took them all outside the classroom, showed them the entire building, and after they came back from their tour, each one of them was encouraged to introduce themselves in front of the class, and soon, the time for their first recess came. Izuku was happy to get up from the provided tiny chair, since he was not used to sitting for so long. There were many new faces all around him, and once again he had no idea how to start a conversation with his new classmates. Then he noticed two girls sitting just 2 seats behind him, one of them had hair with green rectangular spots, and the other looked rather plain, except for the yellow gemstones replacing her eyes. Both of them looked frustrated and hopeless as they wrestled with something small on their desk. Izuku walked over to see what was wrong, and in a few seconds, he understood that the girls were futilely trying to open 2 yogurts, both of which appeared to be stuck. Once he saw it, Izuku had a brilliant idea how to solve their problem. "Hi. Want some help?" he asked awkwardly as he raised his hand in greetings. "Can you open it?" the yellow-eyed asked hopefully, gesturing to the cup. "I think so," he said before removing his glove. Izuku focused on his index finger and watched as it elongated and flesh on it transformed into a sharp blade made from bone covered in hard enamel. He swiftly cut a large hole in the top of the cup before setting it back on their desk. His mother sometimes let him help her when she was cutting vegetables after she got over the initial shock which she experienced when she first witnessed his ability. He was just about to reach for the second cup but noticed that both girls took a step back and that their faces adopted a completely terrified expression. When he saw this, Izuku himself felt shocked. This emotion only grew when tears of fear appeared in their eyes. "Wait, it's okay," he tried to say as he outstretched his gloved hand towards the girl with white hair, only to be quickly stopped. "Get away from me, monster." One of the girls shouted as they both ran away from the class, trying to find a teacher, whilst Izuku just stood there frozen, scared and sad. Soon enough his own eyes filled with tears and the green-haired boy began sobbing. The whole incident was quickly resolved and Miss Taka calmly explained to him that sharp objects shouldn't be used in school without supervision. Yet even though he didn't get into any sort of trouble, Izuku's fate was pretty much sealed. Now everyone in class feared him. Whenever he tried talking to someone, they would either ignore him or avoid him like the plague. For all they knew, he could have it underneath his bodysuit. Later that day, when Izuku came home with his mother, he already lost all of his excitement over the promised training. All Might quickly noticed this, and when he discovered what had happened, he tried to cheer the boy up a bit, yet the hero's words didn't help much. Unfortunately for the boy, this situation only got worse. Words traveled quickly and soon everyone heard about the crying demon of their school. It didn't take long, and Izuku became something akin to an attraction. No one really messed with him, yet he felt as if he was always being watched. An entire week went like this, but luckily he was able to meet with friends during the weekend. This improved his mood a bit, but after he returned to school nothing changed. After a few more days Izuku sort of accepted that he wouldn't make any more friends in school, and so he stopped trying. Then Thursday came around. The boy was walking home, it was a beautiful afternoon. The birds were singing, and a few rays of warm sunlight forced themselves through the clouds, and so he decided to enjoy the weather for a while longer and chose to walk through a small park, which was relatively close to the penthouse. Today a curious thing happened. His school bag somehow got displaced after the boy left to use the toilet, and he only found it after nearly 30 minutes with the help from the janitor on top of a large file cabinet. "Come on. Show us." Angry words carried by an angry voice suddenly came from the nearby playground. Izuku immediately tensed when he heard that voice. Izuku walked a bit closer to see what was going on. There were 3 boys in total, and he knew only one of them. 2 tall boys were standing around one of his classmates, not allowing him to leave. He remembered the boy, he was sitting in the back corner of the classroom. He was always very quiet and no one paid much attention to him. He had purple hair and eyes that always seemed to be tired, which were right now opened wide in panic, trying to find a way to escape. "I can't use it," Shinso exclaimed, but the boys were undeterred. The bigger one took a step towards the purple-haired boy and threw a punch to his shoulder so strong that the purple-haired boy lost his balance and tripped into a sandpit. "Everyone knows you've got a villain's quirk, so show us." The taller of the 2 ordered angrily as he made a cloud of steam shoot up in the air out of his palm. "Why can't you just leave me alone?" Shinso thought. Ever since his quirk first manifested in kindergarten, everyone was always afraid to speak to him, since sometimes people would just freeze randomly when he was talking to them and came into their senses only when he ordered them to. Hitachi was trying his best to avoid talking to everyone, but he slipped when he asked an upperclassman where to find the light switch. There was that weird twitch and in an instant all emotion vanished from the girl's face. Once he woke her up, she ran away scared and told her friends. Shinso was pulled out of his thoughts when he heard an familiar voice yelling. "Leave him alone." Izuku shouted as he hurried over to them, which grabbed the attention of everyone. "Hey Ryuji, look at that, it's the other creep," one of the upperclassmen said when the green-haired boy stopped in front of them. "Looks like a Kichi. Now we have the demon and the weirdo," said smiling Ryuji with steam still coming out of his palm in short bursts. Izuku just now noticed that the other one had only one eye with 2 pupils, which was slightly larger than normal, positioned in the center of his forehead. Both of the upperclassmen had to be at least 2 years older and taller by more than a head. The green-haired boy was however not affected by these facts as he pushed through them and blocked them from getting into the sandpit. "Get out of my way," ordered Ryuji angrily, but the boy didn't move. "Don't hurt him or I will stop you." Izuku stuttered and rose his shaking little fists under his chin as a warning, which had little effect. Ichi tried to push the green-haired boy into the sandpit but froze when the solid ground vanished from under his feet and he found himself floating a foot in the air. Once Ryuji saw this, he panicked. "Let him go, you monster," he yelled and sprayed a cloud of boiling hot water straight at Izuku. The green-haired boy tried to dodge the small blast, even though he knew that there was no chance he would be able to move fast enough, but then, something strange happened. "Oh you monster." The word seemingly repeated himself as the hot blast flew harmlessly past him and softly dispersed in the air. Ryuji prepared another blast, and when the younger boy noticed, he acted on instinct. Ichi suddenly fell from the air right on top of his best friend, which made them both end up on the ground. After seeing just how easily Izuku dodged their attacks without moving more than a few inches made them very nervous, but fear really set in when they looked at him and saw the soft purple glow in his eyes. Both quickly scrambled to their feet and ran away like scared little rabbits without another word. Shinso watched a green-haired boy as he quickly turned towards him once the bullies were gone. His eyes were still shining ominously as he reached out his hand. Hitachi recoiled a bit, he felt scared after seeing the other in a fight, yet there was something gentle, which shone even brighter out of the demon's face. "Are you okay?" The green-haired boy asked nervously as he took Shinso's hand softly into his own gloved one and carefully pulled him up with surprising strength. "Yeah, I'm fine, how did you do that? I thought your quirk was for cutting things." Hitachi asked, still scared a bit of the other boy. Such feelings quickly vanished though when Izuku's face adopted a small smile. "I'm not sure," admitted Izuku after a few seconds of silence. Once the words left his mouth, Shinso couldn't hold back an emusecical. Maybe it was the honesty in the demon's voice or the cluelessness on his face, but the situation immediately lost its seriousness. The two of them quickly became friends after this event. It was clear immediately that Izuku didn't ever judge anyone by their quirk. Soon the two of them spent every recess and every meal together. Bullies never dared to mess with either again, and it didn't take long until Izuku invited Hitachi to hang out with his other three friends. Despite his insomniac appearance, Shinso fit right into the group. A few days later Izuku began his training with All Might and it was not an easy task. Toshinori always seemed like a gentle soul, but he was one hell of a trainer. 20 more burpees. The green boy gasped for breath as he was given another order by the number 1 hero. "Do I hear a quitter?" All Might asked playfully as he took a sip from his sports bottle while running at a calm pace on the treadmill. "And no." Izuku answered as he quickly dropped to the floor, did a push-up only to jump back up only a second later. Exercise was just a small part of this training though. Toshinori also asked his mother to prepare him meals that were bigger than normal, which was no hard task since she also didn't want her son to remain skinny forever. But a few weeks into the training, his small body began to feel different, he had more stamina than ever, and his baby noodle arms began to slowly harden, yet he was still banned from using All Might's quirk, which was a bit frustrating. Over time he adapted to this routine, he was faster, stronger and just a bit more confident, going from his normal, "I don't know if I can" attitude into a better, "I will try" attitude. To say that Toshinori was proud would be an understatement. Instead of walking, he would run home from school without getting winded or sweaty. It was only Wednesday, and he was running home from school when he saw it. An adorable puff of white and black fur peering at him from an alleyway with big bright blue eyes. He stopped to take a closer look, but the puff immediately turned around and sprinted away on its 4 legs. "Hey, wait up." Izuku yelled and quickly followed the small animal into the alleyway, but it vanished in seconds, and he reached a dead end. The ghost. After looking around for a while he became confused and disappointed, but as he got ready to leave, he heard a growl from behind. There just a few feet away from him was a small puppy that looked quite angry. Its coat was white with a large streak of black across its back. It looked like a husky, but much wider, it was not fat per se, just heavy built. Its shining blue eyes were completely focused on the boy. It couldn't be older than 3 months. The growls were soon accompanied by surprisingly loud barks, which made Izuku take a step back. "What do you want, little guy?" he asked, but the puppy just wouldn't stop barking and showing its baby teeth. "Is this a hold-up? Are you hungry, little guy?" Izuku asked as he took off his bag and reached for a mostly empty bento box his mom prepared for him. Even his school lunch portions were increased and he often found himself bringing some of it back home. There were 3 baby sausages left, so he took one and threw it to the small dog, who simply leapt up and caught the piece of meat in the midair, which made the boy smile excitedly. The other 2 sausages soon had the same fate. After filling its belly, the puppy completely lost all of its aggression, quickly wagged its tail in happiness, and Izuku was incited to give the dog a friendly pet. This attempt was happily accepted. After getting its TNC the dog hurried away, yet the boy somehow knew it wouldn't be the last time he saw this little menace. And lo behold, 2 days later, when Izuku was once again making his way home, the dog appeared yet again, and this time it obediently waited for the boy's approach and led him back into the alleyway. This time Izuku was prepared to pay his tribute, but this time the puppy swiftly crawled under a small trash container, only to emerge again, just 30 seconds later with something gray in its mouth. Izuku felt very nauseous when he understood just what it was. It was a half-eaten medium-sized rat. The boy felt his stomach twist once he saw the thing, and it only worsened once the dog put its prey down and pushed it towards the boy with its nose before sitting down and looking up expectantly. "Oh you didn't have to, no, really that's pretty gross," the boy commented nervously once he was faced with this strange offering. Once again out came the bento box with some ham rolls still in it. When the dog understood just how much better they tasted than the mouse, it completely forgot about the dead critter and paid it no mind when the small creature ended up in the trash. This sort of thing repeated a few more times until one day, the dog didn't stay behind. It walked side by side with the green-haired boy straight into the penthouse, and after a bit of pleading from Izuku and a lot of puppy eyes from the little mutt, there was no way that the newly named hero was going to stay outside. And that's where we landed. If you want a part 3 to this series, like the video, and if you have any what if ideas, leave a comment. Alright, peace.